Not every training begins with a raised hand. Some lessons start with a slap and end with the gentlest touch of forgiveness. A wild horse rescue center on the brink of collapse. A man burdened by a past of rigid discipline and irreversible mistakes. And a coal-black Mustang, a survivor of wildfire, untouched by any hand, as if he believed only in truth, not in humans. When wounds don't come from whips, but from betrayed expectations. When connection is no longer forged by reins, but by sincere remorse. A wild creature rose, not to fight, but to teach mankind something no one expected. It isn't discipline, but forgiveness, that tames the untamable. Hope Ridge, a Mustang rehabilitation center tucked deep in the Nevada desert, had once been the last hope for horses no one believed in anymore. But this year, the budget notice posted at the gate had been reduced to a single, chilling line. Restructure. Downsize. Potential closure. No one dared take the final project. Except Jonas Keller. A 52-year-old former military trainer, bearing a long scar running from his shoulder down to his left wrist. No one knew whether it came from a battlefield or from a horse that had fought back. He was the man who once painted this slogan across every training wall. Discipline creates connection. But to many, that was just another way of saying absolute control. When Jonas stepped out of his rusted pickup in front of the center, Hope Ridge had only 3 unrehabilitated horses left and 1 double-locked stall. Where Coalfire was kept. No one called its name aloud. A coal-black horse, its entire body cloaked in a shade so dark it seemed to absorb the sunlight. On its neck, a crescent-shaped patch of white fur, as faint as smoke trailing behind a fire. It had been captured with a scorched mane, standing alone amid the burning charcoal wasteland, unmoving, unafraid, staring straight into the rescue team's eyes without blinking. For 6 months, every trainer had failed. It didn't attack. But it didn't yield either. Unafraid of whips. Refused to eat food touched by human hands. Let no one within 10 feet. And now, Jonas was handed a single mission. If he couldn't get Coalfire to cooperate, the entire facility would be shut down. He looked into those black eyes through a layer of cold, rusted bars. It didn't scream. It didn't back away. It just stood still. As if it were waiting. To see if humans would do anything different this time. A wild creature. A man with a haunted past. And a decision that wouldn't come twice. Jonas had only been at Hope Ridge for 22 days. But the whispers came faster than the wind. Is he even trying? That's not rehabilitation. That's military meditation. Coalfire needs a healer, not a statue. The story was easy to sell, a washed-up war trainer using outdated discipline on a trauma-scarred Mustang. A man frozen in time. A horse frozen in fear. And the cameras fed it. News vans began appearing near the gate. A former trainee of Jonas, now an outspoken activist, had gone on a podcast calling Hope Ridge a desert holding cell for the misunderstood. Jonas ignored all of it. But Nora Vale didn't. She'd seen broken systems before. She'd documented war zones, fire rescues, and sanctuaries built on lies. She arrived at Hope Ridge with her mind already made up. But what she witnessed in those first 10 days quietly dismantled every assumption she brought. Because Jonas didn't speak to the horse. He didn't coax or command. He showed up. Every single morning. Sat on the same patch of sunbaked dirt. Sipped coffee from a dented thermos. Closed his eyes. And just stayed. At first, Coalfire stayed at the farthest corner, watching with unblinking suspicion. A black statue with smoke still trapped under his skin. But by day 11, the circles got smaller. By day 15, the ears tilted, not back in warning, but sideways in curiosity. And by day 18, Jonas had stood, turned his back, and Coalfire hadn't moved an inch. No one else noticed. But Nora did. "He's not taming the horse," she wrote in her field notes. "He's teaching it what presence without pressure feels like. For the first time in maybe forever." But just as trust began to flicker like a flame, bureaucracy came with its cold wind. The Hope Ridge Board, under pressure from donors, issued an ultimatum. Visible contact. Within 5 days. Or we reassign. Jonas received the memo in silence. He folded it once, stuck it into his back pocket, and went to the pen, like always. But this time, Nora saw something different in his eyes. Not urgency. Not fear. Something quieter. Something closer to grief. That Friday afternoon, the sun hung over Hope Ridge like a punishment, 104 degrees. The dirt shimmered. The steel fences scorched bare skin. And the guests arrived. Donors. Students. Local journalists. A few bureaucrats from Carson City with judgment in their sunglasses. And one boy. 12. Quiet. Visiting with his father, an investor in the Wild Horse Initiative. He dropped a metal water bottle. It clanged like a gunshot across the pen. And Coalfire, for the first time in days, snapped. His head shot up. His muscles locked. His hind legs kicked dust like smoke. Jonas stepped in immediately. No rope. No halter. Just boots crunching heat-cracked earth and a man walking into a storm. The crowd fell dead silent. Coalfire bolted along the pen's perimeter, ears flat, mouth tight, breath shallow. But he didn't strike. He didn't rear. He ran in half circles and then slowed. Until he stopped. Just 5 feet from Jonas. The man raised his hand. Palm open. Not to catch. Not to demand. To offer. Nora held her breath behind the lens. Her finger hovered over the shutter. The air itself felt like glass. Then, for the first time since arriving at Hope Ridge, Coalfire stepped forward. 1 step. Then 2. Then, his muzzle stretched out, inches from Jonas's fingertips. A miracle was happening. But fate didn't care. Because at that precise moment, behind the pen, a maintenance truck backfired. Violent. Sharp. Like a rifle. Coalfire panicked. He reared violently, front hooves slashing air. Jonas, caught off guard, took a blow to his left shoulder and was thrown into the dirt. The crowd gasped. The horse backed away, wild-eyed, panting, confused. Jonas scrambled to his feet, face twisted, not just in pain, but in something far darker. 6 months of silence. 3 weeks of scrutiny. 1 inch from breakthrough. And now, in front of everyone, he'd failed. Again. And in that moment, something in him cracked. The world didn't spin when Jonas hit the dirt. It stopped. His ribs slammed into the dry earth with a crack he didn't register. Pain rippled through his chest and shoulder, but it wasn't the kind that made you scream. It was the kind that makes you go silent. He lay there, dust in his mouth, heat in his eyes, staring up into the white sky that showed no mercy. Above him, the sound of hooves faded. Coalfire hadn't run. Hadn't reared again. He was just standing. Watching. Jonas rolled onto one elbow, panting. His mouth tasted like copper. The voices beyond the fence were muffled, like he was underwater. But he didn't need to hear the words. He could feel them. He lost control. What kind of trainer lets this happen? This is why we don't bring in military minds. The blood roaring in his ears was louder than all of it. He stood, unsteady, covered in dust, clutching his shoulder like it held him together. Coalfire hadn't moved. The horse's body was tensed, yes, but not in aggression, not even in fear. He was waiting. And that was the final blow. Jonas had spent 6 weeks trying to build a bridge brick by brick and now stood on the wreckage of his own making. Not because of a buck, not because of a bite, but because of himself, his failure, his shame, his humiliation in front of witnesses. And somewhere inside, a familiar voice whispered, "Weakness is dangerous. Don't let them see it. Don't let him win." Jonas didn't remember crossing the distance. He only remembered the noise. His boots hitting the ground. His breathing ragged. His hand rising faster than thought. God damn it. He swung. Open palm. Wrist tight. A slap not meant to injure, but to reclaim control. The sound was sharp. Ugly. Too human for a place like this. It echoed across the pen like a crack in a porcelain mask. Coalfire's head snapped back a half step. Not from force, but from the shock of it. His ears swiveled back, not pinned, not hostile, just lost. His pupils dilated. A tremble rippled down his shoulder. His breath hitched once. And then he stilled. So completely that time itself seemed to recoil. Nora dropped the camera. Not because it broke. Because she couldn't feel her fingers. The donors were dead silent. Even the child, the one who had dropped the bottle that started it all, stared with wide eyes, his expression somewhere between fear and something far worse, realization. Jonas's hand hung in the air, still half raised. His eyes were blank, not angry. Just gone. He looked at Coalfire. And for the first time, saw himself reflected back. Not the trainer. Not the soldier. Not the professional. Just a man who had crossed a line in front of a creature that had trusted him not to. And Coalfire didn't move. Didn't run. Didn't lash out. He just stood there. Eyes locked on Jonas. Not blinking. Not flinching. Just absorbing the betrayal. That moment split something in me, Jonas would later say, voice low, almost broken. I always thought losing control meant yelling, violence, punishment. But the real danger is what comes after. The silence. The look. The absence of trust. That's what haunted me. Nora finally stepped forward, slowly, instinctively, like someone approaching sacred ground. She didn't speak. No one did. Because something had fractured, not just in the man, not just in the horse, but in the air itself. A boundary had been crossed. And no one, especially not Jonas, knew if it could be undone. And then, just as Jonas lowered his hand, as regret finally surged into his bloodstream, Coalfire began to move. But not the way anyone expected. Coalfire stood motionless. No neigh. No kick. No defensive reaction like any wild horse cornered would give. Just silence. A silence not from paralysis, but from choice. Jonas, his hand still not fully lowered, stood there like a statue of disgrace. In front of him was the creature he had just betrayed, not through force, but through the shattering of trust. And then, what no one, not even Jonas himself, could have foreseen, happened. Coalfire stepped back. 1 step. 2 steps. Slow, steady, as if the distance wasn't from fear, but to give truth the space it needed to exist. Then, beneath the harsh sunlight filtering through floating dust, he slowly bent his knees. No one understood. No one believed it. But that horse was kneeling. All the murmurs ceased. The camera in Nora's hand fell silent. The entire facility felt strangled. No one moved. No one dared breathe. Only that image remained. A wild horse who had once refused to let anyone cross within 10 feet of him, now folding to his knees before the man who had struck him. Not submission, not surrender, but a challenge for a human to face himself. Jonas blinked for the first time in over a minute. His eyes were wet, not from emotion, but from the sheer incomprehensibility of the moment's existence. Coalfire rose slowly. Didn't turn away. Didn't walk off. He stepped forward. Not hurried. Not cautious. Just steady, like a heartbeat newly restored. When he was half a step from Jonas, he stopped. And then, with a gesture as gentle as wind brushing the surface of a lake, he pressed his muzzle to Jonas's chest. Right over his heart. Jonas didn't step back. Didn't react. His gaze met those deep black eyes, now just inches away. No anger. No defense. No urging. Just a look that had seen the truth of a man and still hadn't turned away. Everything Jonas had ever believed about punishment, about discipline, about control, collapsed in that single point of contact. Nora stood still, her finger resting on the camera shutter, but she didn't press it. The most important photograph of her career, and she didn't take it. Not because she hesitated, but because that moment didn't belong to the public. It didn't need to be captured. It needed to be witnessed. Coalfire held that touch for several seconds, then quietly stepped back. Just one step. No sound. No further motion. He only looked at Jonas with a gaze no one could decipher. No blame. No demand. No forgiveness. Only the silent question. Now, what will you do with what I just gave you? The entire training pen remained breathless. No one understood what had just occurred. But everyone knew, deep in their spine, that they had just witnessed something far beyond biology, beyond reason, beyond every known lesson of equine behavior. Jonas slowly knelt down. Not to plead, not to explain, but, for the first time, to humble himself before a creature he had once believed was under his control. Jonas couldn't recall exactly how he left the training pen. His feet kept moving, but his mind was blank. No sound. No thoughts. Only a deep, black void where his sense of self-respect used to be. The emergency meeting was held at 7:15 p.m. No invitation. No formalities. Just a single, direct order from Miss Sylvia Crown. Anyone who witnessed it, attend the meeting. No defense statements required. The small conference room held 11 people. The full administrative board. A legal representative from the Wildlife Ethics Coalition. The head veterinarian. 3 staff members directly involved with Coalfire's case. And Jonas. No one greeted him as he entered. No one offered him a seat. He pulled a chair for himself. Sat down. Hands resting on his thighs. Back straight. Eyes forward. But looking at no one. Miss Crown was the first to speak. Her voice was steady, emotionless. We've reviewed the footage. We've read the medical staff's report. And we've heard the witness statements from those present at the scene. No one in the room spoke. No one needed to. The guilt was undeniable. Mr. Jonas Keller. She paused, staring directly at the man she once advocated for. As the head of training, I propose the board immediately terminate your contract, effective at once. No one reacted. No outrage. No defense. No sympathy. Only silence, the kind that comes from people who once believed in you, and now no longer do. Jonas raised his head. But he didn't argue. Didn't provide context. Didn't retell the incident. He simply nodded and said, "I accept the proposal. I didn't come here to be forgiven. I was wrong. Publicly. In front of a creature that was trying to trust me. And I don't want to drain another drop of trust from this place." No one interrupted. No one questioned him. There are moments when the truth is spoken so clearly, it becomes its own punishment. He bowed his head, stood up, and slowly left the room. The door closed behind him, no applause. No one followed. On the way back to his quarters, Jonas felt like he was walking through his own memories. Each tile underfoot was a training day gone by. Each plaque on the wall was a command he once made others obey. Each dim overhead light shone down like the eyes he had once forced to lower through discipline. Now, none of it felt right. And strangely, he wasn't angry at anyone. Just empty. Back in his room, he didn't turn on the light. The small, damp space smelled faintly of old leather and dust. Jonas sat on the edge of the bed. Opened the drawer. Took out a worn leather notebook, the one he hadn't written in for 4 years. He opened to the first page and wrote his first line in a shaky hand. "The day I lost the right to call myself a trainer was the day I began to understand why a horse would choose to stay instead of run." Near midnight, he left the room. Empty-handed. Carrying only the notebook and a pair of worn gloves. He quietly walked across the compound, no one saw him go. As he passed the stables, he stopped. Not because he wanted to, but because Coalfire was still standing there. Not eating. Not lying down. Not turning away. Just standing. Like a living shadow, rooted to the same spot since Jonas left the pen hours earlier. 8 hours. No movement. No signal. No need for anyone to approach. Just standing, like a marker between right and wrong. Jonas stepped up to the fence. Didn't call his name. Didn't reach out. Just stood, one hand's width away. Then he sat down. Back resting against the rails. Eyes closed. Not to rest, but to receive. That night wasn't longer than usual. But for Jonas, it stretched the length of a lifetime's worth of belief. He didn't know what Coalfire was still holding on to. Didn't know if that look, that touch, would ever come again. But he knew one thing. I'm not the one who deserves forgiveness. I'm just someone learning how to live with the presence of my own mistake without hurting it further. The next morning, when the first staff member walked out to the stables, they saw a scene that was never captured on camera. Jonas Keller, asleep beside the steel rails. And Coalfire, still standing. Eyes open. Breathing slow. And never once turning away. 3 days after Jonas left Hope Ridge. The center's official website still hadn't removed his name from the staff list. Not because someone forgot, but because no one dared to decide. That morning, Clara Rowe, an independent veterinarian temporarily assigned to the center, made a proposal. Let him come back. Just one session. No contract. No obligation. At first, the idea was dismissed immediately. Until Nora, who had remained silent for 3 days, finally spoke. I don't care who's on whose side. But if we've ever believed in a horse's capacity to heal, then we don't get to deny that horse its right to choose. All eyes turned toward her. Nora didn't flinch. I'm the one who filmed Jonas slapping Coalfire. But I'm also the one who saw the horse bow and approach him. So, who here dares to say Coalfire doesn't deserve one more chance to choose? That afternoon, under the eyes of nearly 20 people, Jonas returned to Hope Ridge. No uniform. No name tag. No lead rope. Only a faded shirt and a hollow gaze. The training pen had been dismantled. No fences. No barriers. Just an open field where one man would simply stand still and a wild creature would decide everything. Coalfire was released from a distance. No one guided him. No one coaxed. When the gate opened, he paused for several seconds, looked around, then slowly stepped out, as if testing something invisible, something larger than space itself. Was the air here still capable of holding truth? Jonas stood in the center of the field, said nothing, made no gesture, just stood there, arms resting at his sides, as if raising them might shatter everything. Coalfire approached. Slowly. No rush. No breakthrough. Just a natural movement, like the sun rising. The distance closed. Step by step. Wind burst lightly between the two facing figures, like a breath that had been held for 4 long months. Then, Coalfire stood before Jonas. No hesitation. No defense. And in a moment that felt almost unreal, Jonas raised his hand. Not trembling. Not commanding. Not testing. Just a hand to see if he was still allowed to touch. Coalfire didn't back away. Didn't blink. Didn't move. And Jonas placed his hand on the horse's neck. For the first time. In 4 months. The first time, not for achievement. Not for technique. Not for any training program. But simply because a man needed to know if he could still do something without making a creature afraid. The entire compound fell silent. Clara lowered her head. A cameraman set down his equipment. Nora stood frozen, fists clenched, tears not falling, but her throat locked tight. Jonas drew in one deep breath. His hand still rested on Coalfire's neck. Then, slowly, he lifted his other hand to his chest and removed the small tag he'd worn for 14 years. Trainer. He looked at it in his palm. No anger. No regret. Only the quiet release, softer than a sigh, as he let it fall to the ground. I don't need to teach anything anymore. I came to learn. The photo was just a single frame. No embellishments. No edits. No caption. Just this. A silver-haired man, no name tag, no lead rope. And a black horse, standing still, eyes gently closed, its neck resting quietly in the man's open hand. The light came from behind Jonas, casting a faint glow around the crescent-shaped white mark on the horse's neck. That was all. The photo was sent by Nora at 2:12 a.m. After opening and closing the email 5 times, without using her real name. Subject line. Not about training. Attachment, 1 file. No caption. No description. Only a single sentence in the body of the message. If this is not communication, I don't know what is. 48 hours later, the National Geographic Photo Department replied with a single line. Are you the photographer? Nora didn't respond. But 1 week later, that photo appeared on the November cover of their special issue. Emotions we never understood. No subheadlines. No lengthy explanation. Just one small line beneath the image. The Crescent Horse. That name, the Crescent Horse, exploded. People began sharing the image across social media. Not because it was beautiful, but because it stirred something uneasy within them. Why would a horse allow that man to touch it, after everything? What does it understand that we don't? If it forgave him, could we? Veterinary news outlets ignited with debate. Was this the perfect example of non-conditioned behavior? Or simply a case of emotional projection amplified by a striking photo? But the shock didn't come from the arguments. It came from reality surrendering. Within 4 weeks, 9 horse training facilities across the western U.S. voluntarily removed their coercive tack systems. Some stopped using plastic whips. Others opened their enclosures to barrier-free interaction and began documenting the horse's own behavior. They called the new model trust-led training. Its origin? Not a textbook, but a horse who didn't walk away after being struck. At a veterinary symposium at Colorado State University, an elderly professor, eyes wet, said quietly, "Sometimes, the only thing that breaks a system isn't theory, but the gaze of a creature who cannot speak and yet understands you all too well." Meanwhile, Jonas remained at Hope Ridge. He didn't sign a new contract, didn't resume an official role. He simply showed up each morning at 6 a.m., walking the length of the paddocks, empty-handed. Coalfire still waited at the gate, as always. No halter. No cues. Just walking side by side, like two beings sharing a heartbeat. And though no one photographed them, no one filmed them. People began to arrive at Hope Ridge, not to learn how to train horses, but to witness a man and a horse, standing side by side, needing to do nothing at all. Virality had never come from shouting. It came from a moment the world couldn't explain, but didn't dare look away from. That morning, the sun rose earlier than usual. Not blinding. Not blazing. Just enough to cast a pale golden line across the dry grass at the farthest boundary of Hope Ridge. Jonas walked slowly. Beside him was Coalfire, no halter, no name tag, no pressure. Only the sound of quiet footsteps and something still unnamed. A connection, wordless and unspoken. They stopped before the northern gate, where the pasture gave way to true wilderness. The iron gate had already been opened. Jonas placed a hand on the latch but did not look at Coalfire. He looked straight ahead, toward the trees swaying in the wind, as if nature itself were holding its breath, waiting for a decision. He said softly, "You taught me how to let go. Now, I give you your freedom." Coalfire didn't rush. He looked toward the forest. The wind burst through his mane, lifting strands of hair like memories that had never been spoken. Then he took a step. Just one step, toward freedom. Jonas remained still. He knew it was the right thing. A creature once held back, now free to choose its path. He breathed in deeply, ready to accept the space left behind. But Coalfire stopped, then turned around. No panic. No hesitation. He walked back, step by step, and stopped in front of Jonas, gently pressing his forehead to the man's. No push. No cue. Just a single point of contact, deeper than anything words had ever conveyed. And then, he didn't leave. He stayed. Beside him. Between two gates, one opening to the wild, the other leading back to the compound. No tether. No command. Only your choice. Freedom isn't leaving. Freedom is knowing you can leave and still choosing to stay with your whole heart. Coalfire didn't move us because he was obedient. He became unforgettable because he had seen the worst in humans and still chose to believe one more time. And in a world where everyone is rushing to be right, perhaps the more important thing is to have someone who's willing to stay with you, even when they no longer have to. This story is not about submission, not about control. It's about something deeper. Trust, when every reason to trust has already disappeared. Some relationships aren't born from promises, but from the cracks. And sometimes, the bravest act isn't forgiveness. It's coming back after seeing the darkest parts of each other. When a being who was once hurt, once betrayed, chooses to stand again beside the one who caused the pain, it's not weakness. It is the strength of trust reborn. If this story made you pause for just a moment in your hurried life, please share it. Not to go viral, but because someone out there, struggling with guilt, hurt, or hard choices, might need to hear that staying can also be a form of freedom. Tell us in the comments. What did you learn from Coalfire? Have you ever been forgiven or chosen to forgive someone? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel, so you won't miss the next journeys. Stories not just about horses, but about what's left when all the ways we used to control each other no longer work.